Hello everybody, this is Jasmina, and in this video I'm going to talk about picking a good unit out of an apartment building or a condo building. Now, choosing the best apartment or condo is actually not as simple as choosing a good house. It is a lot more work actually. Now, when I would start working with you, and of course I would do all this if you hire me, but these are the steps you can take. First thing you need to do is you need to look at the Qual numbers for everybody who's going to be living in the house, and this identifies good directions for you. And I have a video entitled 8 Mansions, and it also discusses what to do if you have a mixed family in terms of there are people who are in the East group and people who are in the West group. And there's ways to deal with this, and it can be done and it can still be beneficial to everybody. It just takes more care. Now, if you're alone, you only need to worry about yourself. You also need to know the facing direction of the apartment building and the facing direction of your apartment unit, and they are often different. Ultimately, we need to know true north, but you can start out with just UTM north. So you do not want to use a compass. Compasses are terrible in apartments because there's so much electromagnetic interference. You need to use Google Maps, and you find your apartment building, and I have a video entitled something like Finding Your True Facing Direction, something like that. We'll tell you how to do that with Google Maps. Now, this will be the UTM North, and a survey will also be UTM North. But you don't have to go for every apartment that you're doing, you don't have to look and see to convert it to a true north until it passes all the rest of this. Now, I do have on my website, I have a calculator that you can use to go from UTM North to true north. But really, you only need to worry about it at this stage if you are less than 3 degrees closer to the edge of any 15-degree sector in the 24 mountain sectors. That if you're farther away than that, then you don't have to worry about it at this stage. Now, this is something you need to do for me, even if you hire me, unless you want to pay for me to fly to where you are. You need to go to the apartment and look out the windows and tell me whether or not you can see any mountains. Now, mountains in Feng Shui includes hills or higher ground, and if you can see any water. If you cannot see either, don't bother with the apartment. Move on to the next one. This one won't give you any really good energy because you get the chi from outside. So if you don't have mountains or water, you really have no chi to work with. You also need a floor plan of the unit, and it doesn't have to be your exact unit because they usually have a whole entire floor plan and then separate the apartments. If you can get both, that's fantastic. Because in apartments, one floor above the other, they're all identical, almost always, except for maybe the very top floor. That could be a little different. The next thing you need to know is the year the first occupants moved into the building. And that's anywhere in that building, that actual physical building. Now, typically, this is very close to when the apartment's completion date is done. And this you can often find also on the website, in addition to these floor plans. But there's about a 1% chance that this could be quite tricky. And let's just hope it's not that case. And basically, if the building was completed in January of a year that you had a change from one period to the next period, you could have a problem determining the period of the building. And that has consequences. Now, assuming you haven't had a problem with the date at which the first people moved in, then you can start doing a bunch of analysis. The very first thing that you need to do for an apartment or a condo is you need to properly identify and evaluate the apartment's purple-white chart. And for an apartment, this is the most important chart. And in a house, if we're looking at a house, this is a secondary chart. But in an apartment, it's primary. And this is true of condos too. And that's because even though every apartment in that apartment building has the same flying star chart, that energy is divided, because it's really part of the building, it's divided by the number of apartments. So if you have 100 apartments, you get 1% of the energy. So that's why the flying stars of the apartment is not so important. But every apartment will have its own purple-white chart. And that's why this is the primary thing. Now, if you're very lucky, you will be able to find an apartment that has a permanently good purple-white chart. And I have a video that describes the qualifications needed for this and gives some examples. So you can see how to do this on your own if you want to. Now, this is a nice thing to have if you have a house, but this is a real boost to the quality of the apartment if you have it in an apartment. But this isn't like, if you have this, yes, this is good. That doesn't mean this apartment is still good for you. You still have to look at a number of things. But it gives it a very big boost. And if you've got two apartments that are similar, one apartment has this, take this apartment. Now, some apartment buildings have no apartments that will meet this criteria. Other apartment buildings will have several. It all depends on how the building is laid out. And that's something you have no control over. Now, in order to find your purple-white chart, you will need the floor number, and this is typically part of your address. It's the number you would press on the elevator if you have one. But you also need your main door sector location as measured from the center of your apartment. And that's one of the reasons why you need a floor plan for your apartment. Now, you still, remember, need to have some visible mountains of water for this apartment to qualify as a consideration. And the location of these two will determine the strength of this purple-white chart. And if you can see both, it tends to give you some better energy, but one is better than nothing. You also need to identify and evaluate the apartment's Chi-Men chart. And again, this is true for condos too. Typically, you need a book or professional help for this, because I do not know of any free websites that do this for you. I'm sure there are some paid ones, but if somebody finds a free website that does this properly, I will put in the subtitles that information so that everybody can use it. I have not found one though. What I use is this book by Joey Yap. Make sure, and there's a lot of Chi-Men Dunja books by Joey Yap, but only one is focused on Feng Shui. Now, this gives you all the charts, but you still need to understand what's good and what's bad. And that information is more widely available. And I may even have some videos that discuss this in general. But in part, what is a good Chi-Men chart will depend on what your career is. So this is hard to make a blanket statement, but having at your main door a chief and life, or a chief and open, or perhaps instead of chief you could have nine heavens. All those are quite good. But again, you have actually some specific things, for example, like harm doors, which are good for certain people, but not good for everybody. In addition, you need to be able to identify your main door's facing direction, and as I've said before, your unit's facing direction, as well as possible bed facing directions. And the idea is you want to get as many of these in a good direction for you if possible. Now, if you have a permanently good purple-white chart and you have at least a decent Chi-Men chart, then you only need one of these, and then the apartment is good. If this Chi-Men chart isn't terribly good, it's not like bad, but it's just kind of mediocre. As long as you don't plan to stay in the apartment for more than 5 years, this is not such an important factor because this has slower long-term effects. And so if it's not great, you really don't want to be in there for a really long time, but it's okay for a few years. You also need the building's flying star chart. Again, this doesn't have a big effect on your apartment. Even if it has a fantastic flying star chart and it's activated, you only receive a portion of that energy. But there's another reason why we use this. We use the building's flying star chart to look at the chi flow through your apartment and also the chi flow from the building's main door to your main door. And all that is important to determine how much energy you are getting into your apartment. And again, without energy, the purple-white chart isn't activated, the Chi-Men chart isn't activated, and this is the reason why you need Chi. And this is why you have to have mountains or water visible, because otherwise you don't have any Chi to work with. One of the last things that you do, if it's past everything else, you want to look at out of Qual calculations. And I have a video just about out of Qual. In this case, you will have to do the UTM to true north correction. Again, I have a calculator on my website, and I have a video there, both on my website and on YouTube, on how to use Google Maps or a survey to be able to determine your facing direction. And then you just convert it using the calculator on my webpage. As long as you are not out of Qual, you're good. And that's out of Qual with your main door. And in this case, you can also look at, if you have a balcony, your balcony door. Now, this is another complication. Since you typically cannot change your apartment's floor plan, and even in a condo, sometimes you cannot do that too. The analyzing and finding solutions to chi flow to get good chi to the important rooms of your house, it becomes quite a bit more complicated in general. And sometimes some rooms have relatively poor quality chi because of that, because they don't get very much. Now, it is considerably more complicated to analyze an apartment than a condo. One of the big things is chi flow is a lot more complicated, and you may have to have some very strange setups in the room to really get chi flow. And sometimes it makes the room rather awkward to use, and I don't like that. But if it works for chi flow, it's probably worth it. Also, unless you're very lucky and you get an apartment that has one of those permanently good purple-white charts, you're going to have more complicated charts because every year the energy and the quality of the energy and the good locations in your apartment will move around if you do not have a permanently good purple-white chart. And that makes it much harder to function in the space. Unfortunately, getting these special charts isn't terribly easy. I'd say if you're really lucky, you have 20% of the apartments in the building that have a permanently good purple-white chart, but it's possible you have none. So doing an apartment, finding a good apartment can be quite a bit more challenging than finding a good house. And that's why I charge more for analyzing apartments, because there's a lot more to look at because the purple-white chart is the primary chart. That's basically it. Please feel free to contact me here if you have any questions about this video, because it's pretty complicated. You can also come to my website to see more information, and there's some pretty critical things there under my calculator tab. But you can also subscribe to my channel because I will be having regular videos that will help you with this. Thank you again for watching.